Welcome everyone to our presentation. The title of our paper is Exploring the Tensions Between the Owners and the Drivers of Uber Cars in Urban Bangladesh. My name is Taiabul. I'm from the University of Central Missouri. I'll be presenting this paper. My co-authors are from Bangladesh University of Engineering and Technology in Bangladesh, GATEC, University of Maryland, and also University of Toronto. So in this presentation, I'm going to first briefly talk about the sharing economy and its relationship with technology and the specific context of the Global South. I'm going to highlight a few related work, briefly talk about the methods of our work, and discuss the most important findings. And I'll wrap up this presentation by discussing a few implications of our work. So at first, I want to give a brief overview about sharing economy. So sharing economy assumes that there are two groups of people. One is who is the owner of an asset, and the other is the seeker of the asset. The asset could be either a car or an apartment. So the owner of the car or the apartment here wants to, rent this in exchange of money, and the seeker wants to, take this service by being ready to pay some money. So there are a lot of technology-mediated peer-to-peer platforms such as Uber and Airbnb that facilitates this by making a connection between these two parties. Now, this sharing economy becomes a little bit complicated, especially in the context of Bangladesh or Global South, because in Bangladesh, people who own assets such as car are mostly upper middle class or upper class people. They don't want to necessarily drive for Uber. Then the people who want to drive for Uber, they don't have a car for themselves. So what happens here is they rent their car from these car owners. So basically, there is a new group of stakeholders that emerges in countries like Bangladesh, where the owner of the asset and the people who operate that asset are different. So in this work, we try to investigate what are the complex dynamics between these two groups, the car owners and the car drivers. Prior work mostly focused on motivations and limitations of sharing economy, especially in the context of the global north. They tried to find out how the workers, especially who uses these ride-sharing applications, how are their rights protected? How does these ride-sharing applications align with their tempo of work? And they also investigated how gender and racial bias has something to do with the amount of money they make. They also investigated issues related to the rating system. But in the context of the Global South, the labor relationship is different. So some of the works which focus on the context of the Global South, they try to find out how complicated this becomes, especially if we consider the complicated labor structure in the Global South. A work on another ride-sharing application named Ola investigated and found out that despite the promise of improved working conditions and incomes, drivers do not necessarily make more money by driving for Ola. The other works in the Global South, they also reported that many drivers who do not own the car face some additional issues, but they did not explore the complex dynamics between the owners and the drivers. They mostly investigated the relationship between drivers and passengers, and also the application itself. So our work focused on this, uncharted territory, where we tried to find out how does the complex negotiation work between these drivers and the owners. And in that extent, we investigated a few work that talks about complex negotiation as well, which we are going to discuss in the next few slides. In the context of Bangladesh, Uber operates in slightly different way, as I mentioned. Most of the people who own the car, they don't drive it. They use an app called Uber Fleet. So they are the one who registered their car with Uber in the first place, and then they offer it for rent to the drivers. Now, they use the Uber Fleet app to monitor all the cars that they own. So even when a driver is driving for Uber, the owner are allowed and they can basically monitor the activity of the driver by using this Uber Fleet app. The other interesting thing is the drivers do not negotiate with the owners. They do directly pay to the owners, and then owners are the one who pay the commission of the Uber. So the method of our study is we did semi-structured interviews between February to August. We interviewed 10 car owners and 31 car drivers. So some of the important findings of our study is we are going to start with the contract model. In Bangladesh, the drivers and the owners adopt 3 contract model. Number 1 is monthly salary based, where the drivers are basically the personal chauffeurs of the owners. But when the car sits idle, they basically drive for Uber. The idea here is for each drive, they keep a small percentage and the rest of them goes to the owner. So in this model, a driver is both a chauffeur for the owner and also they drive for Uber. The second one is income sharing model, where they do a 40-40, 40-60, 50-50 or a 60-40 split based on the money that they make. And the third one is where the drivers directly rent the car from the owner and pay them a monthly fee. Now, as I said earlier, the main focus of our work is the tension between the drivers and the owners. So we're going to focus on some of the most important findings that we found out. We talked before about the Uber Fleet app, where the owners can track and monitor the drivers. Many of the drivers express their disagreement because they don't like being tracked every time because they feel like they're not doing anything wrong. So why the owners have to constantly, track them? Whereas some drivers say that they don't mind about being tracked. They say that if we are a good person, you don't have to worry about being tracked. So we see a mixed response from the drivers here. Some of them were more concerned about their surveillance and privacy. Others were not. The second major tension was about break hours. The drivers said that they don't have necessary toilet or even prayer breaks. So many of the drivers were religious, then they offer prayers. But the owners didn't like them going to the mosque or prayer rooms to offer prayer because in that case, the car remains outside unprotected. So one owner said there's a major concern because his driver has to pray for 3 or 4 times during a shift. And he is worried, what if during the praying time when the driver is praying, their side view mirror is gone? So they said that they would prefer someone who does not need regular breaks as opposed to someone who do. We found out tensions regarding maintenance and accidents cost because there is no clear written argument and the owners are the more powerful party here. So most of the drivers complain that the owners should sort of abuse them in case of accidents and maintenance. They don't want to, carry the cost of accident and maintenance. And most of the cases, it goes on to the drivers. And they say that since there is no written agreement here, it's easier for the owners to deprive them. As a result of these tensions, we saw them, both parties at some point, some of these, they left Uber. From a driver's perspective, they say that before Uber came, their boss treated them like son. But when the Uber came, they don't care about this family bond, they more cared about which driver can make more money. So they say that, we don't need you anymore because we want someone who can make more money by driving for Uber. So we can see that Uber disrupted the prevailing social dynamics nowadays. From the perspective of the owner, they also think that if they want to make money from the Uber, they have to keep negotiating with the driver. And some of them didn't like it. They say that if you cannot have the mindset of a boss who would constantly argue, suspect the drivers and do whatever it takes, this is not for them. So they eventually basically left Uber. So based on these tensions and the findings, we propose some design implications. We think that Uber, especially in the context of Global South, should address this and impose a rating system, both for the owner and for the drivers, where the drivers can rate their owners and the owners can also do the same for their drivers. To protect the drivers, we recommend the rating to not be immediately visible to the owner. They would aggregate the report and send it periodically to the owner. And also, if Uber finds out that there is a pattern of poor rating for the same owner for multiple drivers, then that's when the Uber should intervene. And at the same time, the owner can also rate the drivers. So based on that, future owners it can help them to hire new drivers because they can see how the prior owners rated these drivers. Second major implication that we propose regarding accident and maintenance responsibility, Uber should propose some written and clear documentation. So Uber should interfere to address this new type of sharing economy that emerged in Bangladesh, where the owners and the drivers are two different parties. And we recommend that the owners should take care of the drivers. And if they don't, Uber should propose recommendation to support the more vulnerable driver community, especially regarding the surveillance, break hours, accidents, and maintenance costs that we discussed earlier. So this was our main findings of the paper. Thank you, everyone.